am the Ghost, but this is a special recap of day one of Sparklet Warz Season 2. A couple things to go over on the Sparklet Warz. Obviously, an opportunity to look at daily standings, but a couple things that are developing right off the bat. A couple things what were speculated ahead of time about parity or lack thereof between factions, and seeing how that's developing already. Seeing where some surprises are starting to rear their heads already as we do get through day one, and some things to watch out for day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 through the next week. And of course, getting all of that together and helping make that all come together. A couple tools that are out there as well to help visualize the daily contests that are going on in Las Vegas right now. Movement of assets, how people are participating, who's participating, and again, what these teams look like as far as their makeup and their activities so far. So we're going to get right into that right up front. And the first thing to get into data is we do see some visualized data through myupland.info. There are other data groups that have put together information on Sparklet Warz. There's different ways to look at some of the data in Sparklet Warz. Upland does have an API that can be pulled to get some more information about who has burnt passes, what teams they're on, what their holdings or properties are, and you can kind of put some of that data together to get a better idea of what could be happening, what is happening, how people are using their properties, where they're placing their assets, and ultimately trying to build a map of where, if you're on a specific faction, where you could be building to be most successful, or where you could counter to be most successful as a team. Let's take a quick look at what we're looking at for data for today. We'll go and look at the official standings. Let's start with the official standings with Upland for Sparklet Warz, where everyone's sitting now for teams. And we do see a story that is even more profound than the first season, with the idea that it is still day one. So we may see some changes over time, but we are very much seeing that a story is already developing. If we jump into Upland, a magic hot dog down in the middle of the screen, we can go on over to leaders. Under leaders, we can go to the official faction score, the real-time score. Ooh, look at the real-time faction score leaders. So real-time faction score leaders, Crypto Knights 25,243.44. Cypher Cyborgs 23,126.91. Purge Pirates, like I said, this idea of parity is already trying to show itself that it's not really there between the three factions. 10,714.06. Now, the interesting part of this story when we talk about how Sparklet Warz is scored and overall what is going on day to day, your standing score at any given time for the real-time faction score is not what is ultimately looked at or scored at the end of the 7 days of the session of Sparklet Warz. It is not what determines who the winners are. It is, however, on a daily basis what is snapshotted, and then a coefficient is applied depending on what day it is to determine what score is. So as of right now, Crypto Knights look like they're winning at 25,243.44 points. However, if we go and look at the official score, we'll see that at the time of snapshot, we get 10% of the standing points on day one. Cypher Cyborgs had more points, so 22,406.43 points is what Cypher Cyborgs scored as of right now. Again, that snapshot happens once a day, and that snapshot, again, is going to be affected by a different coefficient each day, first through the 7th, and we'll go into and remind ourselves of some of those rules. Crypto Knights 2,103.13 official score currently, and Purge Pirates 998.03. So essentially less than half of the other two teams. Reality is this could change a little bit. There is this idea of movement and this idea of sticking with the strategy over time. However, there is one more idea, and that is even just gross number of participants. You've got more participants, you've got less participants. It's hard to be competitive. Cypher Cyborgs have 131 burnt passes. Again, this is a pretty simple calculation, a pretty simple data pull. you look at any person who had a burnt pass. Again, you can identify what the first pass burnt by each person, and that is what's going to tell you what team they're aligned with. So we see this whole list again: 131 say for Cyborgs, 125 Crypto Knights. Very similar numbers there. Purge Pilots at 99. If you are 15% less, 20% less than the other two teams, you are going to see that, it is hard to compete or hard to put up the same number of points. Maybe that affects people's willingness and the amount of effort they want to put in as well. But again, underdogs are a great thing because it keeps things interesting, and sometimes they can find their way to be competitive over time. So looking forward to seeing this work play out day by day. But again, if you look at the scores from where they set at the moment, you do see that there's a pretty significant difference between the scores each team has put up on the board so far. We can also take a look here. Again, this is on myupland.info. We can look at a couple other pieces, including these map, the Sparklet Warz teams map. Get a better idea. Ooh, let's get this a little back up. We get a better idea of where everyone sits as far as where people are moving their assets, who owns what. Ultimately, with this quick color code map, we can see a better visualization of what teams own what properties. And you kind of get this idea that the majority of the properties in Las Vegas, which is where Sparklet Warz Season 2 is currently happening, are not owned by any team. But we can kind of see that there is some distribution of properties. And this distribution of properties, where they're saying on each team, they may be far enough away from the other teams that they're not going to be able to compete. However, all these properties that are on the market potentially for sale, that buying and selling of those properties is what can affect days 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as far as who's putting what points on the board. Again, if you have a untouched asset, you don't have a can against you because you have no competing faction owning properties near you. That could change. And that's what part of the incentive is during these Sparklet Wars. Part of the action on the market, part of the incentive to buy a property is what you can do when you go and buy those properties. But you look at these gigantic properties here, untouchables. They're untouchable down towards the middle of these gigantic properties. If you were to go and put a superstructure in the middle, and there's plenty of these properties here because Las Vegas has some larger properties. And we take a look at all of these large properties here, we'll see that they do offer many opportunities throughout the city to go and do just that and put those superstructures in the middle and not have anyone be able to do anything to reduce the points on those. So we'll see how those are getting built. Those do only get built during season, and we'll continue to see what can be done and what is done to improve the points over the next couple of days. A couple of reminders again on how scoring works during this season. It is day 1, so it is our quick reminder, quick opportunity to take a look at scoring. Just so we know what was going to happen the next several days, scoring affected by the coefficient each day is the most dynamic part of the game, or one of the things that's going to affect how day 1 is different than day 7. Again, strategies can develop over time. Teams can work together in different ways, but ultimately it is that coefficient affecting how much of those points, of the current points, do go towards the overall score. That's going to determine the real winner loser here at the end. You have to stick with the activity. You have to keep building your points as a team, and again, continue to focus on that ultimate goal, having the most points in day 5, 6, and 7 to help determine, or most effectively determine, who's going to be the winner at the end of the competition overall. Let's take a look at the reminders here on a couple things. First and foremost, the scoring, as mentioned, it does incline. Day 1, 10% of the overall faction score is added to the overall score. 20% of the current faction score on day 2. That's what we're looking forward to tomorrow. 30% on day 3, 40% on day 4, 50% on day 5, and 75% on day 6. Finally, on day 7, 100% of that day's faction score, the faction score on that day, is added to the overall score. Ultimately, that means between days 4, 5, 6, and 7, those you can have 0 the first 3 days if you have a big enough difference in your scores for day 4, 5, 6, and 7. You can win it all, and that is why we should not count out any team in the early days. Even though it does look like the Purge Pirates are far back, it does not mean that they will not be able to come up against smaller number of participants, but ultimately placement of properties, where you own properties, and how you use the assets you have as a team together, that can make a difference as far as overall score. So looking forward to seeing how things shape up for tonight. We will look forward to taking a look back tomorrow, being able to look at the city map again, potentially seeing it shift a little bit. We can see this city map shift as discussed. We do have one faction or another buying properties in areas based on the strategy of not or specifically trying to target the other factions or not being targeted by the other factions. These large properties, placing a superstructure in the middle of them, essentially is going to make them immune from any effect from any outside team. And you can see, even when the Purge Pirates, even though they're a smaller team, they got plenty of these large properties, which, again, if the strategy is to build superstructures in the middle of large properties, there's enough large properties throughout the city that those superstructures should be untouchable, that every team has the opportunity to put dozens of superstructures up that couldn't be touched by the other teams. So watch out for that strategy. We'll see how points will continue to build. And the idea of what team has the most Sparklet available to them is going to play out over the next several days as far as who's building what types of structures, how they're able to score points. And again, if you have the ability in your team to buy new properties to be more competitive, we'll see that strategy played out as well. So looking forward to it for tonight. Thank you so much for jumping in. We're looking forward to day 2 tomorrow of Sparklet Warz.